Good evening, everyone. My name is Aaron Tuckfield. I'm the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals. The time is 6:30. The date is April 7th, and this is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Macomb Township Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm going to call this meeting to order, which is item 1, and then take us to item 2, which is the Pledge of Allegiance. If you could stand with me for the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Very good. Our secretary is out this evening, so I'm going to ask Ms. Posey to call the roll, and I think she's graciously acknowledged to do so. So, Ms. Posey, could you call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Member Piper?
Here.
Member Fosdick? Here. Member Posey? Here. Member DeCoster?
Here.
And Chairman Tuckfield.
Here. All members are present, which moves us on to item 4, which is addressing any conflicts of interest. At this point in time, we're going to call the roll. If any members have any conflicts this evening with any of the items we're going to see, please signify by saying yes. If you do not, please signify by saying no. Ms. Posey, please call the roll.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Member Piper?
No.
Member Fosdick? No. Member Posey? No. Member DeCoster?
No.
Chairman Tuckman?
No. All right, very good. Moving on to item 5, which is the approval of the agenda. Is there any comments or motions on the agenda this evening?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Motion by Mr. DeCoster. Is there support?
I'll support that, please.
Supported by Mr. Piper. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That item carries, and the agenda is approved. That moves us on to item 6, which is the approval of the previous meeting minutes. That would be the minutes for the February 3rd meeting. Is there any discussion or motions on this item?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a correction.
Go ahead, Mr. DeCoster.
It would be on number 8B under election of officers, the motion to reappoint you as chairperson. You actually abstained from the vote, but you were listed as affirmative for the vote as well.
Very good. Actually, I think we might have had more people abstain now that you mentioned that. Just checking through these other ones here.
I don't believe I did on ours.
Okay. All right, well, we can leave that as the correction. Maybe when they go back to check that, if Josh, if you can have them check to see if anybody else did as well.
Will do.
Any other comments?
I'll support the approval with the suggested amendment.
If there's no further discussion, motion by Mr. DeCoster, assuming Mr. DeCoster made the motion, support by Ms. Posey. Any discussion on that? I should just check. No? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. That motion carries, and the amended minutes are adopted. My grammar is great this evening. That moves us on to old business, which is item 7. We have no old business this evening, I believe, Mr. Box. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, we'll move on to item 8, which is new business. Item 8A, this is a variance request from the zoning ordinance 10.1605G. That's to eliminate a 6-foot masonry wall requirement for permanent parcel 08174511002. Taco Bell of America, LLC is the petitioner. Mr. Box, could you give us the department reviews on this, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Board. As you mentioned, this is a request for a variance to eliminate the 6-foot masonry wall that would be required per ordinance. The property is located on 23 Mile, as you see behind you. It's currently zoned C2. The landowner is working with Taco Bell for a development on this property. Recommendations have been given in your packet by all the departments listed here. So just pointing out the ordinance, they are required to provide a 6-foot high decorative masonry wall, as well as some setback area separating the structure, parking, and passenger vehicles, because it is adjacent to an R1S parcel or a residential parcel. So if you look at the drawing here, this kind of shows the layout of what they're proposing for the Taco Bell establishment. The blue line is the property line, and what's in yellow is the easement of the drain. What would be required typically by ordinance would be that the masonry wall would be on the property line. The property line is in the middle of a drain, so obviously they cannot build a wall in the middle of the drain. In some instances, we've moved that wall requirement to the edge of the drain or the edge of an easement. In other cases, it's been waived. In this instance, the drain itself runs further north, but not much farther north. I actually spoke with the county drain office today. First of all, it's potential that this drain in the future could be abandoned. I don't think it's a very wet drain. Most of the properties that at one time drained into it no longer do. They've been draining into their own established underground pipes, and now this one and the one north of it are the only ones left that would potentially go into this drain. So were a masonry wall built on the edge of the easement, in the future, if this drain went away, they now would have a wall sitting kind of in the middle of their property, which could cause some other issues in the future. Additionally, it might cause some problems maintaining. If the drain is maintained, they would have to then maintain this drain. They might need to access it. I don't know if they can get access off of 23. I don't know what the elevation changes there. It does look like there's a bit of a grade difference there. What they're proposing is in supplement of the setback area or the green belt. That easement is already 30 feet, and they're adding additional green space in there. Additionally, I think the petitioner who's here will talk about this, but this parcel is a lot bigger than what's here. Let me go back a couple slides here. So as you see the layout of the parcel, the Taco Bell itself is roughly ends about here. So there's a significant portion of this parcel that's undeveloped at this point. Were they to develop it in the future, they would need some type of access around the edge. So putting a wall in there would complicate the potential development for the rear of this parcel as well. The property immediately adjacent, you may recall, was before you to not have a masonry wall. That was granted, conditioned on the fact that if this were to ever develop as residential, then they would be required to build the wall. Obviously, this has been rezoned now to commercial, so that wall will not be required anymore on this site. The adjacent property here is residential. The township did undertake getting rid of all of the R1S zonings in the township. We're down to 5 of them, and these 3 in a row are 3 of those 5 left. We did attempt to rezone them as industrial. That was denied by the Planning Commission and the board. However, the landowner did show up at that meeting in support of the industrial rezoning. So the likelihood of this remaining residential in the future, I guess I would say is relatively low. It is master planned for flex use, which would allow commercial, industrial, or residential. But in seeing what's built around it, it's likely that it would no longer be residential in the future, which would mean a wall's not required anyways. That being said, I think you have these in your packet, but there are no objections from assessing, no objections from fire. Engineering pointed out the same thing I mentioned, that you can't install a wall in the middle of a drain, and eliminating the wall does not pose any specific engineering-related concerns. I think from the planning department perspective, the potential flex use next door, we would hate to see a wall built and then the neighboring property end up not being residential anyways, in addition to all the issues that might arise from potentially building this wall that may end up coming down in the future anyways.
Thank you, Mr. Box. Any questions for Mr. Box from the board? Hearing none, is the petitioner in the audience? If so, if the petitioner is in the audience, if they could come forward and state their name and address for the record and give any comments they might have.
Hi, I'm Sarah McGowan. I'm with the GPD Group. We're the engineering architecture firm for this project.
I'm Peter Zingas. I'm the developer of the site.
Very good. And if you could give your addresses as well. Sorry,
Say
thank
that.
you.
No, you're good. My address is 520 South Main Street, Akron, Ohio, 44311. That's the main office. It's not mine, but yeah, I'm from Atlanta.
Okay. Even further than Akron.
My address is 18400 Terra Drive, Clinton Township, Michigan.
Very good. Thank you. Did either of you have any comments on this past what Mr. Boxon stated?
Mr. Box covered most of everything we wanted to discuss. I also wanted to include that our neighbor, the residential neighbor, has provided a letter of support to not build the wall. She's been very supportive of the Taco Bell project.
Okay, very good. Is that something that the township has by any chance? I know I haven't seen a packet, I didn't know if you provided it or not.
Didn't she email it?
It's my understanding that she emailed, I can give you a copy, that she did put an email into your Dropbox with the township.
It's possible that the complexity of our packet, sometimes the planning department isn't always able to get it to us, so, if you could, I'd appreciate it. Just be mindful of the step here. I'd hate to have you trip on it. Thanks, sir.
This is her forwarding it to me, but that was her email to the township.
Very good, thank you.
Is there an email address it went to? Oh, okay.
Very good, and I'm just glancing over this, but do any board members have any questions for the petitioner?
I do have one.
Go ahead, Mr. Coster.
Mr. Box showed us the 30-foot buffer from the center of the drain, and you were adding another 10, I believe, of green space. Is that correct?
Correct. And then also, during the due diligence, we haven't formally submitted to any other jurisdictions yet, but with the Drain Commission, they mentioned they might widen that easement from 30 feet on our side to 40 feet. So then which be even worse, right, for the wall, so.
My question is, what type of landscaping? Are you planning on putting any landscaping in that 10-foot area outside the drain?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember, I don't have the plan printed, we submitted it for the site plan approval. Oh,
If you can read small print.
look at, he's on top of it.
The other thing I think that, you know, with regards to that wall, the intent is really for privacy and sound and all that. I think it's good to keep in mind that we're not the only ones that have an easement, right? So they have an easement on their side of the drain. It's even farther. You know, any type of, any type of, you know, privacy that they would need is not your typical adjacent residence to commercial or industrial here. There's not usually a 60-foot easement, you know, with the drain, and then we're not allowed to touch the vegetation in that easement area. So there's trees, there's pretty good cover between us, and if it were ever to be residential on that side, I think that would be hopefully enough to have the privacy that we would want.
I'm just curious if you were planning on putting anything. I think that's going to go to the planning commission, but I'm just curious what you're planning, or if you're planning on
I'm
planting
sorry, I should
anything.
have known this. We have a row of shrubs right now for the parking buffer. That'd be within that 10 feet, and 2 trees.
Okay, thank you.
3 trees, I can't count.
Any other questions? Hearing none, and without objection, I'll open this to the public. The time is 6:44. Is there any members of the public who'd wish to speak on this item? If so, please come forward and state your name and address for the record. Seeing none, and with no further objection, I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back to the board. Mr. Box, to follow up on Mr. Coster's comments, obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. I feel there's a pretty clear practical difficulty of putting the wall on the property line. I think that's obvious. And then whether or not it should go further back is, I get maybe more the question that we're looking at here. What was your department's thought on potentially having, requiring them to do some type of additional landscaping? Obviously, the property to the east, we expect to go industrial or flex, as you pointed out, but it's not that way yet. Had you considered that, or what was your thinking on that score?
Right, so at this point, the landscape plan hasn't been approved, it hasn't been to planning commission yet. I think they would have some leeway, and I would think that they would take into consideration whether or not a wall is there. So if were you to grant a variance of this wall, they would be able to then take that into consideration of what they would require for the landscape buffer.
The Taco Bell would require an SLU, correct? Because the drive-through.
That's correct.
So it would be within the planning commission's purview to attach additional or more requirements as regards to landscaping.
Correct, and that will be, I know you're on the planning commission as well, that will be on your next agenda, so.
Okay, very good. And then just briefly to touch on one thing I forgot, Mr. Box mentioned the planning commission and the board decided not to rezone this industrial, I think at the time, and Mr. Box can correct me, but I think the thinking was that it was clear that it needed to move from residential, but that the flex zoning that was anticipated with the new master plan update would give more flexibility for both the owners and maybe to the township to make sure it was harmonious with the surrounding area. So obviously, it hasn't been rezoned, but I think at the time, the indication was not that it didn't want to change from residential, just that maybe there was a better way to change it when we got there. So that being said, I'll bring it back to the board for any questions, comments, or motions.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there definitely is a practical difficulty because of the drain and the easement, so I would move to grant this variance, please.
All right, motion by Mr. Piper. Is there any support?
Support.
Support by Ms. Posey. Is there any discussion? Hearing no discussion, Ms. Posey, will you please call the roll?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Member Piper?
Yes.
Member Posey, yes. Member Fosdick?
Yes.
Member DeCoster?
Yes.
And Chairman Tuckfield.
Yes. That motion passes unanimously. That variance has been granted. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Ms. Posey.
All right, just scroll back up to my agenda. Beauty of having everything digital. All right, next is item 9, which is public comments. If there's any members of the public who wish to speak, please come to the microphone, state your name and address for the record, and we have a 4-minute time limit if you would like to speak. I don't see anybody coming up to speak, although I am going to call out a former planning commissioner in the audience. Mr. Jasper Shudo is here tonight. We're happy to see him. Served a long time in the planning commission and did a lot of good work there. Next item is ZBA member comments. Anyone from the board have anything to say this evening?
I will just mention that I was talking earlier that I will miss the June meeting. I'll be out of town, so I just remind Josh that I'll need a replacement for June.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Piper. All right, if there's no other comments, I'll move on to the planning director comments. I should note, I don't think we have any, do we have a PC liaison entry in here? I thought we did.
Say that again?
I might be just thinking of planning commission rhythm, but I thought there was a liaison entry on the ZBA agenda. Maybe I'm just grown too used to it on the planning agenda and it's not been there, but I don't think I have anything. I was just thinking about what I was going to say and then I went to the agenda and there was nothing there.
Yeah, it was not on the last meeting minutes
Okay.
either, so I don't think so.
Very good.
Aaron,
Well,
your time is up.
I wasn't planning on saying anything, so more's the good thing. Item 11 is planning director comments. Mr. Box, do you have anything for us this evening?
I'll just note that there will be a meeting next month. We have one item, it looks like. I think it's a pool setback request.
Okay.
That's a lot that fronts on 2 streets, a corner lot, so it's kind of the double front yard issue that we've seen before. And I think that will be the only item. That's it.
Very good. Mr. Orlando, I know you're not on the agenda, but do you have anything for us this evening?
I sure don't.
Okay. Very good. All right, moving us on to item 12, which is adjournment. Is there any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Ms. Posey. Is there any support? Support by Mr. DeCoster. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by saying nay. At 6:49, we stand adjourned.